The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Valdoria Palace as Captain Marcus Thornfield adjusted his ceremonial uniform one final time. 20 years of service to the Royal Guard had taught him that state ceremonies demanded absolute perfection, and today's gathering would be no different. The occasion was young Prince Adrian's 8th birthday celebration, a grand affair that would host dignitaries from across the neighboring kingdoms. Marcus positioned himself at the entrance to the Grand Hall, his polished rifle gleaming against his royal blue uniform. The weight of the weapon felt familiar in his hands, a constant companion through countless state functions, diplomatic meetings, and royal processions. His fellow guards stood at attention along the ornate corridors, each one hand-picked for their unwavering loyalty and impeccable discipline. The Kingdom of Valdoria had enjoyed a period of unprecedented peace under King Edmund's rule, but tensions had been building within the royal household. Queen Isabel, beloved by the common people for her charitable works and gentle demeanor, had been growing increasingly distant from court life. Palace staff whispered about heated arguments behind closed doors, though none dared speak openly about the royal couple's troubles. Princess Cordelia, the king's sister and second in line to the throne, had arrived 3 days earlier with her usual entourage of advisors and supporters. Her presence always brought a certain electricity to the palace, though not always the pleasant kind. Known for her sharp tongue and political ambitions, Cordelia had never quite accepted her brother's ascension to the throne, believing herself better suited for leadership. As the morning progressed, guests began arriving for Prince Adrian's celebration. The young prince, with his bright blue eyes and infectious smile, had captured the hearts of the kingdom's people. His natural curiosity and kind spirit reminded many of his late grandfather, the beloved King Theodore, who had ruled with wisdom and compassion for 40 years before his peaceful passing. Marcus watched as families of noble birth filed into the grand hall, their children dressed in their finest clothes, carrying elaborately wrapped gifts for the birthday prince. The sound of laughter and conversation filled the air, creating a warm atmosphere that seemed to chase away any lingering concerns about court politics. But underneath the festive exterior, Marcus sensed an undercurrent of tension. His trained eye caught the way certain courtiers avoided others, the whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when approached, and the forced smiles that didn't quite reach people's eyes. Years of protecting the royal family had taught him to read the subtle signs of brewing conflict. Princess Cordelia made her entrance fashionably late, as was her custom. Dressed in a stunning emerald gown that complemented her auburn hair, she commanded attention wherever she went. Her entourage followed closely behind, including her personal advisor, Lord Garrett, a man known for his calculating nature and questionable methods of achieving political goals. Queen Isabel greeted her sister-in-law with the proper courtesy expected at such occasions, but Marcus noticed the brief moment of tension that passed between them. The queen's smile seemed strained, and her usual warmth was notably absent. Prince Adrian, oblivious to the adult tensions surrounding him, ran excitedly between guests, his joy infectious despite the underlying currents of unease. The celebration proceeded smoothly through the morning hours. Children played games in the palace gardens while adults engaged in the complex dance of court politics. Musicians provided entertainment, and the kitchen staff had outdone themselves with an elaborate feast that would be served later in the day. Marcus remained vigilant throughout, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd for any potential threats or disturbances. The security protocols for royal events were extensive, but he knew that sometimes the greatest dangers came from within rather than from external forces. His instincts, honed by years of experience, told him that this particular gathering might test those protocols. As the afternoon approached, the formal presentation of gifts was scheduled to begin. This was always a highlight of royal birthday celebrations, where visiting dignitaries and noble families would present their offerings to the young prince. The tradition dated back centuries and was considered one of the most important ceremonial aspects of royal life in Valdoria. The grand hall had been transformed into a magnificent setting for the gift ceremony. Tall windows allowed natural light to illuminate the space, while crystal chandeliers added sparkle and elegance. Red velvet cushions marked the spots where the royal family would sit, with young Prince Adrian's special chair decorated with ribbons and flowers appropriate for the joyous occasion. Marcus took his position near the royal seating area, ensuring he had clear sight lines to all entrances and exits. His fellow guards were stationed strategically throughout the hall, each one alert and ready to respond to any situation that might arise. The rifle in his hands felt reassuring, though he hoped it would remain purely ceremonial throughout the day's events. As the ceremony began, Marcus reflected on how much the royal family meant to the kingdom. King Edmund had brought stability and prosperity to Valdoria, while Queen Isabel's humanitarian efforts had improved the lives of countless citizens. Prince Adrian represented the future of their beloved kingdom, a bright young mind who would someday inherit the responsibility of leadership. The first few gift presentations proceeded without incident. Noble children approached the young prince with their offerings, curtsying or bowing appropriately before presenting beautifully crafted toys, books, and art pieces. Prince Adrian's genuine delight at each gift created smiles throughout the assembled crowd, and even the most serious courtiers seemed charmed by his enthusiasm. However, Marcus noticed that Princess Cordelia appeared increasingly agitated as the ceremony continued. Her usual composure seemed to be slipping, and she engaged in intense whispered conversations with Lord Garrett between presentations. Whatever they were discussing was clearly causing her considerable distress, though Marcus could not overhear the specific details of their exchange. The tension in the room began to shift as more perceptive guests noticed the princess's unusual behavior. Conversations became more subdued, and several experienced courtiers began positioning themselves strategically, as if anticipating some form of conflict. Marcus felt his muscles tense slightly, his training automatically preparing him for potential action. Queen Isabel, ever gracious, continued to guide the gift ceremony with practiced ease, ensuring that each young guest felt welcomed and appreciated. Her natural ability to connect with children was evident, as she encouraged shy visitors and celebrated enthusiastic ones with equal warmth. Prince Adrian stayed close to his mother, clearly comfortable and happy in her presence. The afternoon sun reached its peak, casting the grand hall in brilliant light that seemed to highlight both the beauty of the celebration and the growing tension that Marcus could feel building like an approaching storm. His experience told him that something significant was about to happen, though he couldn't yet predict what form it would take. As the ceremony neared its midpoint, Marcus made the decision to signal his fellow guards to increase their alertness. A subtle hand gesture communicated his concerns without alarming the civilian guests. Years of working together had created an almost telepathic communication system among the royal guards, allowing them to coordinate their responses seamlessly. The next few minutes would prove that Marcus's instincts were correct, as the joyful birthday celebration was about to take a dramatic and unexpected turn that would challenge everything he thought he knew about protecting the royal family he had sworn to serve. The turning point came when Lord Garrett approached Princess Cordelia with a folded piece of parchment. Marcus watched as she read its contents, her face transforming from mild irritation to barely controlled fury. The message, whatever it contained, had clearly pushed her beyond her usual limits of self-control. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded the parchment and tucked it into her sleeve. Young Prince Adrian had just received a beautiful wooden horse from the Duke of Riverside's daughter when Princess Cordelia rose from her seat. The movement was abrupt enough to draw attention from several nearby guests, but most assumed she was simply stretching or preparing to present her own gift to the birthday prince. Marcus's training kicked into high gear as he observed the princess's body language. Her jaw was clenched, her fists tightly closed, and her breathing had become rapid and shallow. These were clear warning signs of someone approaching a breaking point, and in his experience, such moments in royal settings rarely ended well for anyone involved. Queen Isabel noticed her sister-in-law's agitation and attempted to catch her eye, perhaps hoping to diffuse whatever was troubling Cordelia before it escalated further. The Queen's diplomatic skills had resolved many delicate situations over the years, but this particular moment seemed to be moving too quickly for her usual methods to prove effective. The Duke of Riverside's daughter had just finished presenting her gift when Princess Cordelia stepped forward, breaking the established protocol for the ceremony. Traditionally, senior royals waited until the end of the gift presentations to offer their presents, but Cordelia appeared to be operating outside normal conventions at this point. Prince Adrian looked up at his aunt with innocent curiosity, having no understanding of the adult tensions swirling around him. In his young mind, this was simply another part of his wonderful birthday celebration. and he was eager to see what gift his aunt had brought for him. Marcus found himself in an unprecedented situation. His training had prepared him for external threats, assassination attempts, and security breaches. But the current scenario involved a member of the royal family, whose behavior was becoming increasingly unpredictable. The protocols for such situations were far more complex and delicate than dealing with obvious enemies. Princess Cordelia's voice cut through the gentle murmur of conversation when she spoke. Her words were directed at Queen Isabel, and their content immediately changed the atmosphere in the grand hall from celebration to confrontation. She accused the Queen of manipulating King Edmund and poisoning his mind against his own family. The assembled guests fell silent, shocked by the public nature of such serious accusations. In Valdorian court culture, family disputes were typically handled privately, away from public scrutiny. The fact that Princess Cordelia was airing these grievances during a children's birthday party added another layer of impropriety to her actions. Queen Isabel's response was measured and diplomatic, attempting to redirect the conversation toward more appropriate channels. She suggested that they discuss these matters privately after the celebration, emphasizing the importance of maintaining proper decorum during Prince Adrian's special day. However, Princess Cordelia's emotional state had progressed beyond the point where reasonable discourse was possible. The mysterious message from Lord Garrett had apparently contained information that pushed her past her breaking point, and she was now operating purely on emotion rather than rational thought. Marcus exchanged glances with his fellow guards, all of them recognizing the deteriorating situation but uncertain about the appropriate response. Their primary duty was to protect the royal family, but when the threat appeared to be coming from within the family itself, the situation became exponentially more complicated. Prince Adrian, sensing the tension but not understanding its source, moved closer to his mother for comfort. Queen Isabel instinctively placed a protective arm around her son, a gesture that seemed to further inflame Princess Cordelia's anger. The sight of the Queen comforting the young prince appeared to trigger something deeper in Cordelia's psyche. The verbal exchange between the two women escalated rapidly. Princess Cordelia's accusations became more specific and more damaging, touching on sensitive political matters that had no place in public discourse. She claimed that Queen Isabel had been systematically undermining her position within the royal hierarchy and influencing important kingdom decisions without proper authority. Several distinguished guests began quietly making their way toward the exits, unwilling to be present for what was clearly becoming a major royal scandal. The Duke of Riverside gathered his family and departed hastily, while other nobles followed suit, leaving only the most curious or politically invested observers in the grand hall. Marcus realized that his role was evolving from ceremonial guard to active protector. While no physical violence had occurred, the situation was becoming increasingly volatile, and his instincts told him that intervention might soon become necessary. The challenge lay in determining the exact moment when action would be appropriate and justified. Queen Isabel maintained her composure admirably, continuing to speak in calm, measured tones despite the increasingly aggressive nature of Cordelia's attacks. Her royal training served her well in this moment, as she understood that losing her temper would only escalate the conflict further and potentially cause lasting damage to the kingdom's stability. Lord Garrett remained near Princess Cordelia, though his role in the unfolding drama was unclear. Marcus made a mental note to investigate the contents of that mysterious message later, as it had clearly been the catalyst for the current crisis. Whatever information it contained had transformed a manageable family tension into a public confrontation. The birthday celebration had now completely derailed. The remaining children looked confused and frightened, while their parents struggled to decide whether to remove them from the situation or stay to witness what might be a historically significant moment in Valdorian royal history. Prince Adrian's cheerful demeanor had disappeared, replaced by obvious distress as he watched the adults around him engage in increasingly heated conflict. The young prince couldn't understand why his special day had suddenly become so unpleasant, and his confusion was evident in his wide, worried eyes. Marcus felt the weight of his responsibility more acutely than ever before. Protecting the royal family had always been his primary mission, but the current situation required him to consider multiple layers of protection, both physical and political. The wrong action at this moment could have consequences that extended far beyond the immediate crisis. Princess Cordelia's anger reached a new level when she began making accusations about the legitimacy of Prince Adrian's position as heir to the throne. These were dangerous words in any royal context, as they touched on fundamental questions of succession and legitimacy that could destabilize the entire kingdom if given credence. The verbal assault became increasingly personal and vicious, with Cordelia attacking not just Queen Isabel's political actions, but her character, her worthiness as a queen, and her fitness as a mother. The attacks were clearly designed to wound on the deepest possible level, and Marcus could see their effect on the queen despite her attempts to maintain dignity. It was at this moment that the situation took its most dramatic turn. Princess Cordelia, perhaps frustrated by Queen Isabel's refusal to engage at the same emotional level, redirected her anger toward the most vulnerable target in the room. She turned her attention to young Prince Adrian, and her words became cruel and targeted. The 8-year-old prince, already distressed by the conflict he was witnessing, became visibly upset as his aunt's verbal attacks focused on him. The child's confusion and fear were evident to everyone present, and several remaining guests gasped at the inappropriate nature of involving a young child in adult political disputes. Queen Isabel's protective instincts overwhelmed her diplomatic training as she moved to shield her son from his aunt's verbal assault. The queen's response was swift and decisive, marking the moment when the confrontation shifted from political disagreement to personal family crisis that would require immediate and careful resolution. The moment Queen Isabel stepped between Princess Cordelia and young Prince Adrian, the dynamic in the Grand Hall shifted dramatically. What had been a war of words between two adult members of the royal family suddenly became a direct confrontation involving the protection of a vulnerable child. Marcus felt his muscles tense as his training prepared him for the possibility of physical intervention. Princess Cordelia's fury seemed to intensify when faced with Queen Isabel's protective stance. The sight of the queen shielding Prince Adrian appeared to represent everything that Cordelia believed was wrong with the current royal hierarchy. Her face flushed red with anger, and her voice rose to a level that could be heard throughout the expansive hall. The few remaining guests watched in horrified fascination as the confrontation reached unprecedented levels of intensity. The Duke of Westmore, a veteran courtier who had served 3 generations of Valdorian royalty, later described the scene as the most shocking display of royal discord he had witnessed in his 50 years at court. Prince Adrian, pressed against his mother's protective embrace, began to cry quietly. The young boy's distress was evident to everyone present, and his tears seemed to fuel Princess Cordelia's anger rather than soften it. Her accusations against Queen Isabel became more personal and more devastating with each passing moment. Marcus made the decision to move closer to the royal family, positioning himself where he could intervene quickly if the situation escalated to physical confrontation. His movement was subtle but purposeful, designed to be ready for action, without appearing threatening to any member of the royal family. The verbal assault from Princess Cordelia continued relentlessly. She accused Queen Isabel of being an unfit mother, an inadequate queen, and a manipulative influence on King Edmund. The attacks were clearly designed to cause maximum emotional damage, and Marcus could see their effect on the queen despite her attempts to maintain royal composure. Lord Garrett remained close to Princess Cordelia, though his exact role in encouraging or restraining her behavior was unclear. Marcus noted that the advisor made no apparent effort to calm the situation or guide the princess toward more appropriate behavior. If anything, his presence seemed to enable her continued verbal assault. The turning point came when Princess Cordelia began making specific threats about Prince Adrian's future. She spoke about how the young prince would never be fit to rule, how his bloodline was tainted, and how the kingdom would suffer under his eventual leadership. These words crossed a line that even the most politically jaded observers found unacceptable. Queen Isabel's protective instincts reached their limit when Cordelia's attacks focused directly on 8-year-old Prince Adrian. The queen's voice, which had remained calm and controlled throughout the confrontation, finally showed signs of strain as she demanded that her sister-in-law stop involving an innocent child in their adult disputes. The emotional intensity in the room reached a critical mass. Prince Adrian's quiet crying had become more audible. Several remaining guests were clearly uncomfortable with witnessing such a private family crisis, and the verbal exchanges between the two women had devolved into personal attacks that served no constructive purpose. Marcus positioned himself strategically, knowing that his intervention might soon become necessary. His years of experience had taught him to recognize the warning signs that preceded physical altercations, and several of those indicators were now present in Princess Cordelia's behavior and body language. The princess's anger seemed to be feeding on itself, growing more intense with each exchange rather than burning out naturally. Her accusations became wilder and more inflammatory, touching on conspiracy theories about Queen Isabel's background, and suggesting that the queen had somehow manipulated her way into the royal family through deception. It was at this crucial moment that Princess Cordelia made the decision that would change everything. Frustrated by Queen Isabel's continued attempts to protect and comfort Prince Adrian, she moved toward the child with clear, aggressive intent. Her approach was sudden and threatening enough to trigger Marcus's protective instincts. The physical contact came without warning. Princess Cordelia, in a moment of uncontrolled fury, struck young Prince Adrian across the face. The sound of the impact echoed through the grand hall, followed immediately by the child's cry of pain and shock. The action was so unexpected and inappropriate that several witnesses later claimed they initially couldn't believe what they had seen. The impact of Princess Cordelia's hand against the 8-year-old prince's face created a moment of stunned silence throughout the hall. The remaining guests stood frozen in disbelief, unable to process that they had just witnessed a senior member of the royal family physically assault a child during what should have been a joyful birthday celebration. Marcus's reaction was immediate and instinctive. The sight of a member of the royal family he was sworn to protect being physically attacked triggered every aspect of his training and professional instincts. The fact that the victim was a vulnerable child made his response even more urgent and decisive. The rifle that had been a ceremonial accessory throughout the morning suddenly became a very real symbol of the gravity of the situation. Marcus's grip on the weapon loosened in shock, and the polished metal barrel slipped from his trained hands, clattering to the marble floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the stunned silence. The sound of the rifle hitting the floor broke the spell of shocked silence that had fallen over the grand hall. Prince Adrian's crying became more intense, while Queen Isabel gathered her son into her arms with a fierce protective intensity that transformed her from diplomatic queen to defensive mother in an instant. Princess Cordelia seemed to realize what she had done as soon as her hand made contact with her nephew's face. The anger that had driven her actions began to fade, replaced by a growing awareness of the magnitude of her transgression. Striking a child was unacceptable in any context, but assaulting the heir to the throne during a public ceremony crossed lines that could never be uncrossed. Lord Garrett finally stepped forward, perhaps recognizing that his patron had moved beyond any possibility of political salvation. His attempts to guide Princess Cordelia away from the scene came too late to prevent the damage, but his urgency suggested that he understood the serious consequences that would inevitably follow. The few remaining guests began to move, some rushing toward the royal family to offer assistance, others backing away as if trying to distance themselves from a crisis that could have far-reaching political implications. The Duke of Westmore approached Queen Isabel, offering his support and expressing his shock at what had transpired. Marcus found himself in uncharted territory. His training had prepared him for external threats, but the current situation involved protecting members of the royal family from each other. The protocols for such scenarios were complex and required careful consideration of political as well as security implications. The grand hall, which had been filled with birthday celebration joy just hours earlier, now felt heavy with the weight of scandal and crisis. The elaborate decorations seemed almost mockingly cheerful, given the gravity of what had just occurred, and the abandoned gifts served as reminders of how quickly celebration could transform into catastrophe. Queen Isabel's priority was clearly her injured and traumatized son, but Marcus could see her mind working through the broader implications of the incident. As queen, she would need to manage the political fallout while ensuring justice for the assault on Prince Adrian. The balance between mother and monarch would be tested in the coming hours. Princess Cordelia's realization of her actions seemed to grow with each passing moment. The political ambitions that had driven her confrontational behavior now seemed trivial compared to the reality of having physically harmed her 8-year-old nephew. Her face showed a mixture of shock, regret, and growing fear about the consequences she would face. The aftermath of Princess Cordelia's assault on Prince Adrian unfolded with the swift precision of a well-rehearsed emergency protocol. Marcus quickly retrieved his rifle from the marble floor, his hands shaking slightly as the full implications of what he had witnessed began to settle in his mind. 20 years of protecting the royal family had not prepared him for the sight of one family member attacking another during a children's birthday celebration. Queen Isabel's transformation from gracious hostess to protective mother was complete and immediate. She gathered Prince Adrian into her arms, examining the red mark on his face while whispering soothing words to calm his frightened sobs. The Queen's royal training served her well, as she managed to comfort her injured son, while simultaneously maintaining enough composure to address the crisis unfolding around them. The remaining guests in the grand hall found themselves unwilling witnesses to what would undoubtedly become one of the most significant scandals in Valdorian royal history. The Duke of Westmore, drawing on decades of court experience, quickly took charge of managing the civilian witnesses, quietly but firmly suggesting that they allow the royal family privacy to address this serious family matter. Lord Garrett's attempts to guide Princess Cordelia away from the scene met with mixed success. The princess seemed torn between wanting to flee the consequences of her actions and needing to face the reality of what she had done to her nephew. Her political advisor's urgency suggested that he understood the gravity of the situation far better than Cordelia appeared to at that moment. Marcus positioned himself between Princess Cordelia and the Queen, with Prince Adrian, his training dictating that he maintain protective distance until the situation could be fully assessed and controlled. The sight of his ceremonial rifle had already sent a clear message to everyone present about the seriousness with which the Royal Guard was treating this unprecedented incident. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the hall as additional palace security arrived, having been alerted by the unusual activity and the early departure of several prominent guests. Captain Williams, Marcus's immediate superior, appeared with a small contingent of guards, their faces grim as they quickly assessed the scene before them. Prince Adrian's crying had subsided to quiet whimpers, but the red mark on his face served as visible evidence of his aunt's assault. Queen Isabel continued to comfort her son, while her eyes blazed with a protective fury that Marcus had never before witnessed from the typically diplomatic queen. The maternal instinct had completely overridden her usual political considerations. Princess Cordelia's demeanor continued to shift as the reality of her actions sank in more fully. The righteous anger that had driven her confrontational behavior was rapidly being replaced by what appeared to be genuine shock and growing remorse. However, the damage had been done, and no amount of regret could undo the fact that she had physically struck the heir to the throne. Captain Williams approached Marcus with quiet professionalism, requesting a brief summary of the events that had led to the current crisis. Marcus provided a concise but comprehensive account of Princess Cordelia's escalating verbal assault and the moment when she crossed the line into physical violence against young Prince Adrian. The political implications of the incident began to crystallize as various court officials and advisors arrived on the scene. The assault on Prince Adrian was not merely a family dispute, but a serious crime against the crown that would require formal investigation and potentially severe consequences. The fact that it had occurred during a public ceremony with witnesses made it impossible to handle the matter quietly. Lord Garrett's whispered conversations with Princess Cordelia became more urgent as he apparently attempted to explain the severity of her situation. His political calculations were evident, as he tried to determine whether there might be any way to minimize the damage to his patron's position and reputation within the royal hierarchy. Queen Isabel made the decision to remove Prince Adrian from the Grand Hall, carrying her son toward the royal family's private quarters, where he could receive proper medical attention and emotional support, away from the continuing chaos. Her departure marked a clear end to any possibility of continuing the birthday celebration that had been so violently disrupted. Marcus accompanied the Queen and Prince Adrian, maintaining his protective presence while other members of the royal guard dealt with Princess Cordelia and the remaining witnesses. His primary duty remained the protection of the immediate royal family, and Prince Adrian's well-being took precedence over all other considerations in the current situation. The royal physician, Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, was summoned immediately to examine Prince Adrian's injuries. While the physical damage appeared to be limited to facial bruising and soreness, the emotional trauma of being attacked by a trusted family member during his birthday celebration would likely require more extensive attention and care. As news of the incident began to spread throughout the palace, The reaction was one of universal shock and dismay. Palace staff, who had served the royal family for decades, struggled to comprehend how such a beloved celebration could have deteriorated into violence and scandal. The contrast between the morning's joyful preparations and the afternoon's crisis seemed almost surreal. King Edmund was immediately notified of the assault on his son and the involvement of his sister in the attack. His return to the palace was expedited, and arrangements were made for him to assume direct control of managing both the immediate family crisis and the broader political implications of Princess Cordelia's actions. The investigation into the incident began immediately, with witness statements being collected from everyone who had observed the confrontation and assault. Marcus found himself in the unusual position of providing testimony about a member of the royal family he was sworn to protect, but his duty to truth and justice overrode any personal discomfort with the situation. Princess Cordelia was placed under palace arrest while the full scope of the investigation could be completed. The charges she would potentially face ranged from assault on a minor to treason against the crown, depending on how the legal experts interpreted her attack on the heir to the throne during an official royal function. The mysterious message that Lord Garrett had delivered to Princess Cordelia became a focal point of the investigation. Palace intelligence officers worked to determine its contents and origins, suspecting that it might have contained information deliberately designed to provoke the confrontation that had led to the assault on Prince Adrian. Queen Isabel's focus remained entirely on her son's recovery and well-being. The diplomatic and political aspects of the crisis would have to wait until she was satisfied that Prince Adrian had received appropriate care and support. Her maternal priorities clearly outweighed her royal obligations in this particular moment. The birthday celebration that should have been a joyful family gathering had transformed into a criminal investigation and potential constitutional crisis. The gifts that had been presented to Prince Adrian remained scattered throughout the Grand Hall, forgotten reminders of how quickly circumstances could change in the complex world of royal politics. Marcus reflected on how his role as protector had evolved throughout the day. He had begun the morning prepared to defend against external threats, but the real danger had come from within the royal family itself. The incident had challenged every assumption he had made about the nature of his duties and the sources of potential harm to those he was sworn to protect. The palace buzzed with activity as officials, investigators, and medical personnel worked to address the immediate aftermath of Princess Cordelia's assault on Prince Adrian. The incident would have lasting consequences for the royal family, the kingdom's stability, and the future relationships between family members who had once shared bonds of trust and affection that now seemed irreparably damaged. The investigation into Princess Cordelia's assault on Prince Adrian revealed layers of political manipulation and personal grievance that had been building for months beneath the surface of royal court life. The mysterious message delivered by Lord Garrett contained fabricated evidence suggesting that Queen Isabel had been secretly negotiating to disinherit Princess Cordelia from the line of succession, information designed to provoke exactly the kind of emotional outburst that had occurred. King Edmund arrived at the palace 3 hours after the incident, his face grave with the weight of having to address both a family crisis and a potential constitutional emergency. His first priority was his injured son, spending considerable time with Prince Adrian and Queen Isabel before turning his attention to the broader implications of his sister's actions. Dr. Hartwell's examination of Prince Adrian revealed no serious physical injuries, but she recommended ongoing psychological support to help the young prince process the trauma of being attacked by a family member he had trusted. The emotional impact of the assault was evident in the child's withdrawn behavior and reluctance to discuss the events of his birthday celebration. Marcus found himself playing a crucial role in the formal investigation, his eyewitness testimony providing essential details about the escalation of Princess Cordelia's behavior and the moment when verbal confrontation crossed into physical violence. His detailed observations helped investigators understand the sequence of events and the factors that had contributed to the unprecedented assault. The revelation that Lord Garrett had deliberately provided false information to Princess Cordelia added another dimension to the investigation. Palace intelligence officers discovered that the advisor had been in communication with political factions opposed to King Edmund's rule, suggesting that the attack on Prince Adrian might have been part of a broader conspiracy to destabilize the monarchy. Princess Cordelia's initial defiance gradually gave way to genuine remorse as she began to understand the full magnitude of her actions. The realization that she had been manipulated into attacking her innocent nephew by fabricated information did not excuse her behavior, but it provided context for understanding how the situation had developed so dramatically. The legal proceedings against Princess Cordelia moved forward with careful attention to both justice and constitutional precedent. The assault on Prince Adrian constituted multiple serious crimes, including child abuse and potential treason, but the unique circumstances of royal family dynamics required careful consideration of how to proceed with prosecution. King Edmund faced the painful decision of how to address his sister's crimes while maintaining family relationships and royal dignity. The attack on Prince Adrian demanded justice, but Cordelia remained his sister and a member of the royal family whose prosecution would have far-reaching implications for the monarchy's reputation and stability. Lord Garrett's role in manipulating Princess Cordelia became the focus of a separate investigation into potential conspiracy and treason. His connections to political opposition groups suggested that the assault on Prince Adrian might have been intended to create exactly the kind of crisis that could weaken public confidence in the royal family's stability and fitness to rule. The staff members who had witnessed the incident were provided with counseling and support to help them process what they had seen. Many had served the royal family for years and struggled to reconcile their loyalty and affection for the family with the shocking reality of witnessing one member assault another during what should have been a joyful celebration. Queen Isabel's protective instincts remained heightened in the days following the assault, and she made the difficult decision to limit Princess Cordelia's access to Prince Adrian and other royal family members until the investigation could be completed and appropriate security measures implemented. The trust that had once existed between the family members had been shattered. The public relations challenge of managing news about the incident required careful coordination between palace communications staff and the kingdom's media outlets. The assault on Prince Adrian could not be hidden, but the details needed to be presented in ways that maintained public confidence in the royal family while ensuring justice for the young victim. Marcus received commendation for his professional handling of the crisis, though he privately struggled with questions about whether he could have intervened sooner to prevent the assault. His training had prepared him for external threats, but the complexity of protecting royal family members from each other presented challenges that would require new protocols and procedures. The investigation into the broader conspiracy revealed additional evidence of efforts to manipulate royal family relationships and create instability within the monarchy. Several court officials with connections to opposition political groups were identified and removed from their positions, leading to significant changes in palace security and personnel policies. Prince Adrian's recovery proceeded slowly but steadily, with child psychology specialists helping him understand that his aunt's behavior was not his fault, and that the adults around him were committed to ensuring his safety and well-being. The young prince's resilience impressed everyone involved in his care, though the incident had clearly affected his trust and sense of security. The resolution of Princess Cordelia's case required balancing justice with mercy, accountability with family preservation. King Edmund ultimately decided on a sentence that included exile from the kingdom, loss of royal titles and privileges, and mandatory counseling and community service related to child welfare organizations. The punishment was severe but stopped short of the death penalty that some legal experts argued could be justified. Lord Garrett faced more serious consequences for his role in manipulating Princess Cordelia and potentially participating in a broader conspiracy against the monarchy. His trial revealed extensive evidence of his involvement with political opposition groups and his deliberate efforts to create instability within the royal family for political gain. The incident fundamentally changed security protocols for royal events, with new procedures designed to better monitor and respond to internal family conflicts that might escalate to violence. Marcus played a key role in developing these new protocols, drawing on his experience during the crisis to help prevent similar situations in the future. The relationship between Princess Cordelia and the rest of the royal family remained severed, with little prospect for reconciliation given the severity of her assault on Prince Adrian. The exile that resulted from her actions meant that she would likely never again be part of the family she had damaged, through her moment of uncontrolled rage. Queen Isabel's role as protector and advocate for her son strengthened her position within the kingdom, as citizens admired her fierce defense of Prince Adrian and her grace under pressure during the crisis. The incident, while traumatic, ultimately demonstrated the royal family's resilience and commitment to justice even when it involved their own members. The birthday celebration that had been so violently disrupted was never resumed, though palace staff made efforts to ensure that Prince Adrian received the joy and celebration he deserved through smaller, more secure gatherings with close friends and family members. The young prince's 8th birthday would forever be remembered for the wrong reasons, but his recovery showed remarkable strength. Marcus continued his service to the royal family with renewed dedication, his experience during the crisis having deepened his understanding of the complex challenges involved in protecting those he served. The incident had tested every aspect of his training and professionalism, ultimately strengthening his commitment to the safety and well-being of the royal family he was sworn to protect. The Kingdom of Valdoria eventually recovered from the scandal, though the incident served as a lasting reminder of how quickly political ambition and personal grievance could threaten the stability of even the most secure institutions. The assault on Prince Adrian became a cautionary tale about the importance of addressing family conflicts before they escalated to violence, and the need for constant vigilance in protecting the most vulnerable members of society, regardless of their status or position.